that sort of takes us on to the next point, which is it too late to stop? Like, if we realised right now that the danger outweighed the benefit, could we stop? And I think perhaps we couldn't. And the thing is, the reason why we couldn't is because even knowledge that there's something in the box kind of opens the box. If no one knew that AI was possible, in fact, if people thought that it was impossible, you wouldn't have a world of people desperately trying to open it, and perhaps you wouldn't have to worry. But where we are now, where people have seen that AI is something which seems achievable, machine learning AI now, either you develop it or the other guy will. Either you make it or your enemy will. And either you work for the good guy doing it or someone else will work for the bad guy doing it. And again, I hope there's a problem with my I hope there's a flaw in the logic I'm using for any of this, because I'm not happy with the world that this is painting. I'm not happy with the path this looks like we're on, because I'm not seeing many good options as to how we control this. Because the only way, let's say, there was a global resolution to avoid the development of AI, if that was unenforced, someone, somewhere, would continue trying to develop it in the same way that people seek to develop nuclear weapons once they know they can exist. And in order to stop the development of things like that, you need global surveillance, global enforcement. And that's not too far a step from a constant global tyranny. And when your options have reduced to something bad or something bad, you're not really on a good path anymore. And so, yeah, it seems like knowledge leads to opening the box, and avoiding that leads to tyranny. And I guess you could simplify that to knowledge leads to tyranny. And I hope there's something illogical about that statement. There must be. The world's more complex than that statement allows. But in conclusion as to why this could be catastrophic and has put us onto a bad path, a really bad path, I would say that this is a world enslaving tool that is at best wielded by humans, and at worst wields itself. And now that we know it could be created, we may need a global tyranny to stop it being recreated. And these are all dreadful options, but it's hard not to see this as the path that we're on. And considering how catastrophic a picture that is painting, you may think, well, but it doesn't feel like the world is like that. And yeah, no, it doesn't, does it? But that doesn't mean that it isn't like that. So, for example, like we live under constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Nukes are grim as hell. I mean, I've always been struck by the description of the ant-walking alligator people holding dead babies upside down. And yet we get used to that idea. We just don't think about it. But the thing about nuclear weapons is they're very on-off. They're either creating a hell on Earth, or life goes on pretty much as normal, except possibly with a peace dividend from the fact that people can't actually attack you for fear of creating hell on Earth. The worry with AI is it's not that binary. It's not that the world will end or it will not, because it is going to seep into everything. And there are all sorts of pernicious consequences that could happen, even if it isn't just that the world ends all at once one day. So humans can get used to a lot. They acclimatize. Things tend to normalcy. But also, sometimes they don't. They say companies go bankrupt slowly, and then all at once. And things fall apart in the same way. So hopefully, it's not as bad as it could be. either in terms of what AI does or what we do to avoid it. I hope there's a path where this isn't terrible. But considering the amount of horror that is possible, even if there's only a 1% chance of that happening, I think it very much warrants everyone talking about this right now. It feels to me like we're in the minute before the creation of nuclear weapons, and we have a chance to talk about it this time. Or we're in the minute before the creation of, what do they call it? Gain-of-function research in a virus. Something like that. We have the chance right now to talk about whether this is good, all these philosophical ideas, what we're going to do about it. And this has all been pretty bleak and focusing on the catastrophe of AI. So let's lighten things up and see if there are any silver linings about where we're at. So I would say number one, the world isn't entirely digitized at the moment. So there are still some few places in the world where you could survive if the electrical grid went down. And in a way, I think we're very lucky for that. Because maybe the AI won't be able to scour us off the face of the planet all in one go. So that's hope number one. Hope number two, let's see. I think it's quite astonishing, really, that AI is not just being developed behind the scenes, but is being rolled out to the public, at least the later iterations of it. And while certainly the most powerful AIs will be forming tremendous power nodes behind the scenes, I think it's quite good that it's being, democratized in that way, that the public isn't just being completely cut out. Now, obviously it depends. If this is like a nuclear weapon, it's a lot more dangerous for everyone to have a nuclear weapon than it is for everyone to have a handgun. But if this is just an extremely powerful tool, then good. It's good that everyone gets it, because that sounds fair. Let me see. It's good that of all the places that this could have been developed, it seems to be being developed in the West and pretty evenly around the world, and not unevenly in one terrible place. For example, I'd be incredibly scared if only China had this technology. So it feels like we dodged a bullet there. I would say that perhaps this will give us some reflection about whether we really want to live in a world which has enough nuclear weapons to destroy biological life in one go. And once there's an inhuman opponent, perhaps we reflect on having these things lying around and whether or not we think that's acceptable. And I have a final hopeful thought about whether or not we need one global tyrannical government to stop the creation of AI in order to solve the Red Queen hypothesis that seems otherwise to eventually lead to it. And this hopeful thought that I've had is that the world is already beset by horrific danger, and we made systems to deal with it that still manage to preserve the sovereignty of nations and individual liberty. And those systems took an awfully long time to develop, but we managed them. And they weren't the obvious answer, because they're a solution to the same dilemma of we have enemies and how do we deal with them? Or there is a power imbalance in society and how do we deal with it? We've been solving these problems, and we've been solving them in a way that wasn't just there's a terrible threat, so we need to create an even more terrible government to control it. Now, the systems we have made are systems for controlling other humans, and they rely on some of the vulnerabilities that we know humans have, so they tend to have a moral compass. Even if they don't, there's a limit to the damage that an individual human can do. And even if there is no limit to the damage an individual human can do, they will die after a lifetime. And so there will be a regeneration and a possibility for change. But the problem we have is that our systems of control are for controlling humans, and AIs don't have those weaknesses, and therefore I think what we'll need is a new system of control. But the kind of optimistic viewpoint I've just come to which I'm quite glad of, to be honest, is that perhaps that's not the obvious solution to the Red Queen hypothesis. Because, I forget if I've said already, but we're never going to get rid of the Red Queen hypothesis or the prisoner's dilemma as long as there are two entities. These are just forces of nature that happen when independent entities interact. We can no more get rid of them than we can say, can we get rid of power? Well, as long as you have more than one entity, then you can't. And it's not even desirable to get rid of, because you would have to get rid of independent entities, and we can't do that. So, seeing as we have independent entities and these forces will always exist, how do we mitigate against them? And perhaps there's a way of doing it in a way that preserves liberty and sovereignty, but it's not going to be a way that we have at the moment. So we need to think about it right now and make that structure in a way that actually works. Otherwise, we'll probably end up with the worst of both worlds, which would be a tyrannical government ostensibly to control the power of AI, and an AI which can't be controlled, which I'm afraid is probably what we'll end up with. But, and I'll give you an example. So, the world has a problem, which is you can't trust strangers and there are murderers. So, an obvious solution to that is, well, we'll have a tyrannical government that takes away the capability of people to kill each other. But we don't have that, and it's not desirable to have that, because it would be a completely tyrannical situation which took away liberty to an unacceptable degree. And so the solution we've come to isn't the obvious one of stopping power with more power. It's a more subtle one of encourage people to have a good moral compass, be alert to dangerous situations, be possibly prepared for them, but in general, just try to be good. And if everyone behaves that way, then there are very few problems. And where there are problems, then the state can come in and investigate and solve the crimes. So we've got quite a subtle solution for violence in society. Now, we can't extend that to an AI because we can't rely on it having an unshifting moral compass or dying or any of those other things that we've talked about. But that's not to say that there isn't a more subtle solution that would possibly enable us to continue to live in liberty while an AI exists. And I don't know what that structure is, but it's not to say there isn't one. So while I remain very bleak about AIs, perhaps there is some hope that we can make a structure that lets us go on with just about enough liberty left to make life worth living. And that's about all I want to talk about today. We've covered the catastrophic effects of AI. There are less catastrophic effects that I think are more something like dehumanizing. And I think even if we're lucky to escape the world-ending effects of AI, I think they will inevitably and have already had a dehumanizing effect. So perhaps another time I'll talk about that. But don't expect it too much, because I tend to just make videos when there's a big threat to the world. Although the dehumanization from AI is a pretty serious existential threat, maybe more than we realize. So yeah, maybe I'll make a video on that. But much more importantly, if you if you want a t-shirt or a hoodie, you can get one of these images on your choice and faintly express to the world your disgruntlement with the dehumanization and potential death of humanity. And that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.